Hello and welcome to Maths with Jacob. This lesson will focus on halves and quarters. Halves and quarters are basic fractions and they can help us to learn about more complicated fractions. We can do many simple exercises with the fraction of 1/2. Some examples are 4 plus 4 equals 8. If you double 4, you get 8. Half of 8 is 4, which can be written as half multiplied by 8 equals 4, because this multiplication sign here actually stands for of. So basically these two are asking the same question, those two there. Some other examples. Cross out half of the above pairs. So let's cross out half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now why did I cross out 6? Because altogether there are 12 pairs. So I have crossed out half of them. Now the question is, what fraction of the pairs remain? Well, if I have crossed out half of them, then naturally half of them must remain. So the answer is a half must remain. If you know half of a given number, it is easy to work out a quarter of the same number. Let's have a look how we do this with these two simple exercises. After you draw a rectangle around half of the above marbles, how do you calculate a quarter of the above marbles? Now let's see how we do it. Let's go slowly. Solution. Draw a rectangle around half of the marbles. Now you can see here that we have 12 marbles. So if we're going to draw a rectangle around half of them, we are confidently going to do this. See that? So here we have a rectangle drawn around half of the marbles. So what amount is half of the above marbles? Well, it must be 6. So to answer this question here, half of the above marbles must be 6. Use this answer to find a quarter of the marbles. Okay, now what we do, it's very, very simple. All we do, we take this amount here and we halve it again. I repeat, we take this amount here and we halve it again. So what is half of this amount? Well, if we draw that line there, that means half of that amount will give us these marbles here. So a quarter of the marbles equals 3. What is half the number of strawberries? Now let's look at these strawberries here. Let's try and work out half of them. Well, if we count them, 4, 8, 12, 16. So if we draw a rectangle here, we have just found half the number of strawberries. Okay? So that's half the number of strawberries. So if we count those, 2, 4, 6, 8. So that answer is 8. What is 1/4 of the above number of strawberries? Well, we've already found a half. To find a quarter, you just draw a line down the centre. In other words, you're finding half of the total number. And look what we have here, 4. So 1/4 of the above number of strawberries is 4. Now let's explore that a little further on the next slide. If we think about the previous exercises, we can work out that once we know half of a given number, we just halve that amount again to calculate 1/4 of the same number. Let's look at some simple examples. We know that half of 20 equals 10. It could be half of $20, half of 20 marbles, half of 20 apples. We get 10. Therefore, 1/4 of 20, we just halve this amount. Half of 10 is 5. In other words, 1/4 of 20 equals 5. So to get 1/4 of a certain amount, firstly you find half of the amount, and then you halve that again. Let's look at the next example. What is half of 40? We know for a fact that half of 40 is 20. What is 1/4 of 40? Just halve this amount. So half of 20 is 10, and that gives us 1/4 of 40. That is the answer there. What is half of 60? So that could be 60 seconds, for example. So we know that half of 60 seconds is 30 seconds. 1/4 of 60. All we do, we halve that amount to find 1/4. So if you halve that amount, that gives you 15. So 1/4 of 60 is 15. What is half of 80? Half of 80 is 40. To find 1/4 of 80, you just halve this amount. Half of 40 gives us 20. So 1/4 of 80 equals 20. What is half of 100? Half of 100 is 50. What is 1/4 of 100? To find 1/4 of 100, you just halve this amount. That gives you 25. So 1/4 of 100 is 25. So this video has been extremely useful because it's shown us how to calculate 1/4 of something when we know half of that amount. So I repeat, if we can work out half of a given amount, then we can use that answer to work out 1/4.